authors. I'm Joanne Morell, children's and young adult fiction writer and author of short non-fiction for authors. Thanks for joining me for the Hybrid Author podcast, sharing interviews from industry professionals to help you forge a career as a hybrid author, both independently and traditionally publishing your books. You can get the show notes for each episode and sign up for your free author pass over at the Hybrid Author website to discover your writing process, get tips on how to publish productively, and get comfortable promoting your books at www.hybridauthor.com.au. Let's crack on with the episode. Hello, authors! I hope you're all keeping well in whatever part of the world you reside and listen to the podcast in. Today's interview is with Anne Vines on Flight, exploring passion and secrets in wartime Melbourne, and we chat exploring love, war and forbidden desire in her new novel Flight, what draws Anne to this particular period in history and the inspiration behind the story itself, Anne's research for Flight and her surprising discoveries about Melbourne during the war that shaped the narrative, the relationships portrayed in Flight and what readers will take away, Anne's publishing adventure, her burning advice for aspiring authors in the historical fiction genre or in the literature and publishing field, and much more. So in my author adventure this week, I am still coughing and spluttering, but I feel a lot better than I did when I was sick down with influenza A last week. But still lingering, this cough is not going away. I'm still sort of coughing up phlegm, but it's all clear, same as when I blow my nose, it's all clear. Not that maybe I'm oversharing here, but it's just one of those things, isn't it, with winter, how even though you can feel better and be better, things can just hang around. And yeah, I think it's sort of making me feel quite tired and whatnot, so I'm still chugging down the cough medicine and can't wait till it just clears up, because it makes me sound like I'm a 70 a day smoker. It's not great. So I started my wine cellar job, and yeah, it's been different to, just do a different job for a while. I haven't done something like this before. It's quite a physical job, which is good, but yeah, I'm looking forward to learning about the various wines and then turning this knowledge into writing articles. So there's always a purpose behind what I'm doing. It's sort of, I hate that saying, killing two birds with one stone, but I'm doing this job with the wine cellars, getting a knowledge for a future aspiration of owning a vineyard, but at the same time monetizing it further by writing some articles on the knowledge that I'm going to gain. So any wine that has been tasted is spat out because I'm working and that is quite strange because I have never spit out a wine before, so I had to ask, what are you supposed to do here? Are you supposed to swirl it around your mouth a couple times and then spit it out, or what's the actual goal? And yeah, it's just enough. You just sort of swirl it around in your mouth enough so you're getting the taste of what the wine is. And yeah, I mean, it's an experience, isn't it? Like I know how to swirl, I know how to sniff, and now I know how to spit in this spittoon thing, which, yeah, but you can actually see the professionals that do it. A lot of people that work there, they're very into wine, they're very inspired. So school holidays are here. So it's a juggle between now this job out of the home and the hybrid author business as well as keeping the kids occupied. And so, I made a schedule, as I do usually, for what I'd like to get done each day for the week. But the thing is, I think when you've got all this happening, any parents listening will know it's not feasible perhaps to be sitting down and writing every day. It's what I want, but at the moment, writing routine is not I don't have that habit. I'm sort of picking it up, putting it down because there's other things that require my attention that people are waiting on for the podcast as such. I figure as long as I've got a schedule of the work that I would like to complete each day, as long as that gets done of the week, then I know that effectively I'm moving forward. So as everybody who listens to this podcast for a long time knows, it's all about just tweaking what works for you because life changes. You've got to roll with the punches and do what you can. Still happy to be where I'm at, having the projects I've got and the goals and the plans I've got moving forward, just moving forward at my own pace and when I can. Be different when school holidays goes back and then you've got a bit more time, I suppose. But that's just the juggling act between parenting, working, all of it. Wouldn't have it any other way. This week's sponsor is Sanguine Press. Feel-good, fast-paced, emotionally charged women's contemporary fiction. The writer, the hairdresser and the nurse intertwines the struggles and dynamics of three women's working, family and romantic relationships leaning on their long-time friendship to help get them through. In my short non-fiction for authors, author fears and how to overcome them. How many times have you said your writing's crap or shied away from calling yourself an author? Take comfort in knowing your author fears are valid. Other writers feel the same way you do, but are not letting fear stop them from putting themselves out there. We're all feeling the fear, but doing what we love anyway. And you can too. And freelance writing, quick tips for fast success. Starting a freelance writing business? Place yourself in the pro position before you've met with your first client. Invest 1 hour gaining 60 plus quick tips to save yourself time, money and stress, discovering the little but important factors previously unconsidered, having never worked directly with clients before. Books come in ebook, print and some audio and range from $10 to $15 to $28 each, and can be found over at hybridauthor.com.au/books. Anne Vines is a Melbourne-based fiction writer. Her novel, The Shipwife, was published in 2023. Her short stories have won a slew of awards, including the Boroondara Award in 2014 and the Keith Carroll Award in 2020. She was also commended in the Victorian Premier's Literary Award for an unpublished manuscript in 2008. And in the Varuna HarperCollins Award in 2007. She was also shortlisted for the Alan Marshall Award, the Age Short Story Award, and the International Wasafiri New Writing Prize, and has worked on both her novels at Varuna Writers Centre. She completed a Bachelor of Arts at the University of Melbourne in Literature and History, and taught in secondary schools and adult education in Victoria and London, which led her to co-write the VCE English and Literature courses. Anne's latest novel is Flight. Welcome to the Hybrid Author Podcast, Anne.
Thank you, Joanna. It's lovely to be here.
We're so thrilled to have you. Thanks for joining us. Your new novel, Flight, we're very excited about. It explores love and war and forbidden desire, and it's set against the backdrop of wartime Melbourne. What draws you to this particular historical period, and what inspired the story itself?
I think I'm drawn to it because it was a really exciting time in Melbourne, and in a way, it's the most important historical moment for Melbourne. And of course, being born when I was, a few years after the war, I heard a lot about it from relatives, from parents, from aunts and uncles. I heard about what it was like in Melbourne during that time. And this always gave me a lot of questions because as a small person and then a young adult hearing about it, there seemed to be a lot that I wasn't hearing. So I became quite curious as well to research and to read historians' accounts and to talk to other people later in their lives who told me what it was like in Melbourne during that time. I'm also very interested in war and why it happens, how it comes about, the basis of aggression that seems to lead particularly men into taking part in wars. And I've always had a concern about that. I wanted to explore it in some fiction. I find writing fiction brings me very much to the questions that I'm interested in, and it's a wonderful way to explore through other lives and other personalities how these events affect people.
Well, that's incredible. Yeah, I can tell your passion and your interest there. So hence your university degree into history and whatnot. So how did Flight come about? Was it the characters that were talking to you, or just through, your love of history and you just started to get a spark of an idea, or?
Well, I think it was the characters, and it was particularly walking around Melbourne. One day I was walking in Collins Street, which is one of our smart streets, and I was passing the Regent Theatre, which was a cinema in the past, and I suddenly imagined what it would have been like in the 40s when the American servicemen came and Australian girls would have been meeting them there. And I actually had a kind of epiphany with characters, a visualization of characters at that time. And I wrote a short story. At first, it didn't seem that I had a novel to write about it, but the short story stayed with me. And I found the woman character very easy to imagine, but the man was quite hard to imagine. And so I had to do a lot of thinking, a lot of research, and then writing to find this character. But when I did, it was quite astounding because there was just so much in the American background and the coming to Australia, seeing it through an outsider's eyes, seeing Melbourne through an outsider's eyes, that it just fascinated me. And I knew I did have a novel. So when I had time, which was several years later, I did begin the novel.
Oh, amazing. And you mentioned research there. What kinds of research do you take, when researching the novel and just in general?
Yes, well, for that, each novel is different, I suppose. But for that one particularly, I looked at historical accounts, but I also took a great deal of notice of what people told me about their recollections. I was lucky enough to know quite a few older people who did have strong memories of the war, and some people who even had strong memories of their romances with American servicemen,
Lovely.
even their marriages with American servicemen. So that was really quite wonderful. Also, I found, particularly in recent years, that there's a lot of visual material. There are a lot of films that one can find through library websites and other things that just give you such a wonderful view of what Melbourne was like at that time. In fact, I wrote a piece in the novel which is about my characters riding horses around the Tan, which is a path around the Botanic Gardens in Melbourne. Then I found, when I was researching, there were actual films of people in their jodhpurs and their beautiful knitwear riding around the Tan. It was
Oh, wow.
exactly as I had imagined. But it was quite wonderful to find all that film material. There's such a lot of it. And I think we're very lucky these days that we can find not just newspaper material, but film material as well from the actual time.
Yeah, that's amazing. Is there any other sort of audio material and things like radio or anything like that?
Yes, there is quite a lot, but particularly, I suppose, in terms of war experience. And of course, yes, I did listen to that, and probably that's something that made a great impact early on in my researching. There's a lot of material of servicemen sometimes recollecting being prisoners of war, and that also touches a little bit on my novel. Yes, so radio is always very rich source as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that's amazing. So you do all the research first and then you collate it all and you're fictitiously making the characters as you go? Or did you have a process that's been different between the two books or was
Yes. Well, with this book, I suppose I began writing before I did any real research because I was working from memories and conversations. But then I did a lot of research. But I tended to find that there were bursts of research and then bursts of writing. And then I would go back to the research. And of course, I redrafted and I changed the story a little here and there. And that would mean I would want to go back and find new things in the research. But also, people write books, of course, about this. As I was writing the novel, there were people writing historical accounts and putting out new, updated views of what happened during that time, particularly in the New Guinea War arena. Been a whole lot of very, very detailed studies that have come out. And the War Memorial in Canberra, has a wonderful bookshop and wonderful film possibilities to investigate. So I found that I did keep going back to the research because I write quite slowly, really. Thought I'd finished the book, and then I thought, well, perhaps I haven't finished the book. And
is it ever finished?
yes, redrafted a little. Although the elements and the characters stayed the same, they were very strongly in my imagination. But the research I did find I returned to again and again. So although I think you do have to, as a writer, say to yourself, okay, I now must write and stop, sort of finding it easier to read other people's research, it still is good, I think, to come back to it and recheck things, even when you're at the publishing stage.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Can you tell us more about your characters and some personality traits, or what did you want readers to feel when you reflect on their relationship? Like,
Well, the character of the man in Flight is Peter, an American serviceman, an American pilot. And I really was looking for a character who had a great deal of anger, but also a great deal of loneliness and a great deal of capacity for compassion and love. When I was first writing the book, I was getting some help from Varuna, the Writers Centre in the Blue Mountains. And Peter Bishop there, who was the director at the time, spoke to me on the phone on a few occasions about the book and about Peter, the character. And it was quite wonderful talking to him about it because I could see that it seemed to resonate with him. And he said, this is a particular kind of loneliness that men have. And so I was very interested to follow that up and to stick to my gun in a way, because, of course, when you begin with a character, you're really walking a little bit in the dark. But I found when I imagined Peter's childhood and went back to what he would have experienced in America, that was really worth looking at. And I found that because he was a person who didn't have a family, lost a family very early on, even lost an adopted family as well quite early on. This was a person who had suffered a great deal of trauma. And so to go into the war in some ways was adding more trauma, and in other ways was expressing his own kind of anger and aggression at the world. So that's the main male character. I can go on and talk about
tell us. Yeah, absolutely. The male character sounds extremely full of depth, and I think a lot of people will connect with that on some level. Please tell us about the female character.
Yes, well, of course, there's also the war trauma that I explore, the PTSD and so on with the male character. Well, the women, initially, I really only thought I was writing about one woman, but I did end up writing about at least two, which is rather nice. The main woman is Faye. She's Faye Beauregard. And one of my readers has said, well, that tells you everything about her, that name. And not quite, but certainly she is someone who comes from a very established and wealthy background. She's someone whose family have a great deal of prestige, and she almost doesn't have to even think about that or think about her place in the world. So she's a person quite opposite from Peter, very secure, someone without much anger really at all. In fact, she almost appears a little too lackadaisical and accepting of the people around her, such as her mother and the man who wants to marry her. And when she meets Peter, she is quite changed. So that's one of the things that I think is really interesting in the book. What happens to a rather self-satisfied, smug lady when she finds a man who is not only very desirable, but also to some extent a little unattainable, and also someone whom her family disapproves of, her social milieu disapproves of? How does she find it within herself to fight for what she really wants and what she is hoping for?
Amazing.
So the other lady is quite different. The other person, the other woman in the book is a burlesque dancer at the Tivoli Theatre in Bourke Street, Melbourne. The Tivoli was a very successful burlesque comedy and music theatre. And my character is a young woman who's from a working class background, who happens to be very good at dancing and also happens to be very good looking. So she finds herself a job at the Tivoli. That's how, of course, Peter sees her and comes to know her. And she also is very keen on Peter, but unlike Faye, she's much more of a realist, and she's perhaps a little less confident in herself and her way of getting what she wants in the world. But nonetheless, she very much makes a play for Peter, and I think it's rather almost amusing to see the steps that she takes and contrast them with Faye. So I have these two women who are really quite different and playing off each other in a sense, and they do meet. And their meetings are quite interesting too. And I had a lot of fun writing those meetings between such contrasting characters.
Yeah, I bet. As you're speaking, that's all I can think is how fun. It sounds like you've had a lot of fun, constructing some drama and conflict there. No, that all sounds absolutely wonderful and fantastic. What about the publishing of Flight? How have you gone with the publishing journey?
Yes, well, it has been a very long journey. I used to make a joke about how I was writing about the war and I was in a war about publishing. But it almost is how you feel, because you of course get the rejections at the start. It was a strange journey for me. The book, when it was first written, was a great deal longer, and it received commendation at the Victorian Premier's Awards. So that led to a couple of publishers approaching me, and one publisher staying with me for a little while, but then declining. So I think I rewrote and I cut the novel into a smaller book, which it now is. The publishing approaches started again. I was very pleased when I did find my publisher, David Ryder at Interactive Publications. When he saw the book, he was very interested in it straight away. And that was good. And he did have some queries and some changes and, things like that. So one does have to be quite flexible, as I'm sure your listeners are very well aware, when looking for a publisher.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I mean, and that's the back and forth and the collaboration. I guess you can kind of expect it. So, how much did you trim it down when you said you've cut it?
Yes, quite a lot, really. In fact, what I've done is I took out the childhood sections about the male character Peter, and they're in fact now in a novella. But I do think that there is a difficulty with that because I'm writing about the South of America and the North, but the South of America particularly, and quite a few agents, literary agents and publishers said to me, well, they wouldn't really think they could publish this because I'm not in the Southern Writers group in America, which it's a very distinct group that sees itself as having that material. And so if you attempt to write that material, you're not really going to be accepted. So I've had to come to realize that perhaps that section of the book, which is now a little novella, will just stay as something I've done and something very interesting, but maybe it won't get taken up. I suppose a third of the book went into that novella.
You could always repurpose it if you've got a newsletter and put it out as, your lead magnet.
Yeah,
Nothing's wasted.
Well, I think that's always true in writing, absolutely. Yes, because often, even if you cut a whole section, you've learnt a lot by writing that. And yes, often it deepens the characterization because you know those things that happened. And actually, one of the lovely things that happened with my publishing, was once I was working with David Reiter at Interactive at IP, he sometimes suggested or asked questions. And pieces that I had written thinking, oh, well, I can't really include them, suddenly became relevant. And I could say, well, I have actually written a piece about to answer that question you just raised. And, I have written a piece where, two characters break up or where two characters meet. And so I had those things sketched out and I could work those back into the novel. So there were some really wonderful parts of the publishing process where I could expand and deepen moments in the book and put in extra scenes, which made it a lot better, I think.
Yeah, oh no, that's amazing. I love that. I think it's nice to hear positive publishing journeys and things. It's definitely good. Well, you've shared so much already, Anne, but do you have any, burning advice that you'd like to share with aspiring authors, maybe who want to write in your genre or with the publishing, or any challenges you came up against that you think, you know this now, next time you won't do that? Or
Yes, I think it's important to not give up on your manuscript if you think it's one that you really want to write and you really want to see out there. I could have easily just thought, well, that was a novel that I'll never get to publish, but it really did take a great deal of persistence. So I guess one of my main messages always is persistence and to have confidence. It's very hard. And maybe particularly for women writers who are starting out, to have the confidence that their material is really important. I was so thrilled when some people did recognize that book and the first book I wrote and said, well, no one's done that before, or I haven't seen that before. And that's just a wonderful thing to hear. So if you are writing something, and even though it might seem a little outlandish to you, I think it's important to persevere and to take it through to the stage where you can give it to an editor or an agent or a publisher. And it's wonderful. The other thing I think it's wonderful to do is to get people to read the manuscript early on, even first and second and third draft stage. I found people reading it helped enormously, and particularly real writers who are published. I was fortunate to have a couple of people like that who did read the manuscripts.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I guess with the genre you're writing and like historical fiction, do you have people sort of fact check things, or no, because that's your field of expertise? But would you recommend people who maybe aren't from that background, credible sources, I suppose, for whether
Yes, I think that probably would be very helpful. If you don't have a historical background or if you haven't studied history, it probably is very important to do that. I was speaking to an aspiring writer the other day who is starting writing something about a real Australian piece of history. And she has done quite a lot of research. I think if she really want someone to come in and look at it. So I suppose fact-checking, or perhaps just getting someone who's written in the field, a historical person or another interested person, or a person from the community you're writing about, to have a look at the work.
Checking. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Anne. You shared such wonderful expertise. Flight sounds absolutely incredible, and I know our audience are dying to know where can they, discover everything you do on and offline.
Yes. Oh, okay. Well, thank you very much. Yes. Yes. And of course, going to my publisher's website, ipos.biz, is a really easy way to look at the book and find out a little about me too.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been wonderful.
Thank you, Joanna. It's been lovely talking to you, and you've really challenged quite a few things about my own thinking about the book too. So I'll take those and think about them. Thank you very much.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks again.
So there you have it, folks, the exceptional Anne Vines. Next time on the Hybrid Author podcast, we have a loner sold from me, Behind the Book, Why I Wrote The Writer, the Hairdresser and the Nurse. This loner sold is a little different. I want to take you behind the scenes of my latest women's fiction novel, published under my pen name Zara Ellen. This book is incredibly close to my heart, and in this episode I'll be sharing the why behind the story, how these characters came to life, and what I hope readers take away from their adventure. If you're a writer working on emotionally charged fiction, or you just love a good story about messy, realistic women, this one's for you. I wish you well in your author adventure. That's it from me. It's bye for now.
That's the end for now, authors. I hope you're further forward in your author adventure after listening, and I hope you'll listen next time. Remember to head on over to the Hybrid Author website at www.hybridauthor.com.au to get your free author pass. It's bye for now.